In a forgotten corner of the world lived two sisters whom everyone called the poor ones. Not because they were weak, but because they had nothing except each other. No wealth, no parents, no protection, just empty hands and heavy dreams. People looked at them with pity, some with cruelty, some with laughter. But nobody knew what storms these girls were silently surviving every day. Every night, hunger knocked before sleep. Every morning, hope fought against fear. Still, inside their fragile hearts burned a quiet fire, a belief that one day, their names would mean more than their poverty. This is not just a story about money. This is a story about sacrifice, about sisterhood, about choosing courage when life gives pain. One sister believed in hard work, the other believed in faith and patience. Together, they would face betrayal, rejection, loss, and unbearable hardship, but also miracles they never imagined. Their journey begins in darkness, but it will end in light. This is The Two Poor Sisters, a powerful emotional success story that proves one truth. In a small dusty village at the edge of the valley lived two sisters, Era, the elder, and Lena, the younger. Their house was not really a house, just a broken mud shelter with a cracked roof that leaked whenever it rained. Wind passed through its walls as if it didn't exist. Their parents had died years ago in an accident, leaving the girls alone in a world that showed little mercy to orphans. Era was only 16 when she became both sister and mother. Strong on the outside, tired on the inside. She worked wherever she could, cleaning houses, carrying water, washing clothes, anything to earn a few coins. Lena, just 10 years old, was gentle and quiet. She had bright eyes full of dreams and a heart full of questions. She loved stories. She believed every pain had meaning. Every morning began the same way. Era would wake before sunrise, whisper a prayer, and look at her sleeping sister. "I promise," she would say softly, "I won't let this life break you." But life tested that promise daily. Villagers often looked down on them. Children mocked their torn clothes. Shopkeepers refused credit. Even kindness came with conditions. One day, while Era was working in a rich house, she overheard the owner say, "Poor people stay poor because they deserve it." Those words cut deeper than hunger. That evening, Era returned home silent. Lena noticed the pain in her sister's eyes. "Did I do something wrong?" Lena asked innocently. Era hugged her tightly and replied, "No, the world is wrong sometimes." That night, Lena shared her dream. She wanted to study, to read books, to become someone who could help others. Era smiled, though her eyes filled with tears. Education felt like a luxury meant for others. Still, something shifted inside her. The next morning, Era made a decision that would change everything. She went to the town market, not to beg, but to work harder than ever before. She offered help to shopkeepers, carried heavy loads, cleaned stores. Many rejected her. Some insulted her. But one old woman noticed her honesty and strength. She gave her a small job at a cloth stall. It paid almost nothing, but it was a beginning. That night, as the sisters shared a small piece of bread, Era said quietly, "This is not our end. This is only the start." Lena looked at her with hope shining in her eyes. And somewhere beyond their broken roof, destiny began to listen. Life in the city did not become easier after Era found small work at the cloth stall. In fact, it became harder. Every day brought new tests, new insults, and new fears. But now, there was also a small flame of hope burning inside her. Era worked from early morning till sunset. Her hands became rough, her back tired, but she never complained. She learned how cloth was measured, how prices were set, and how customers were handled. She observed everything silently. Meanwhile, Lena stayed at home, helping with small chores and teaching herself to read using old, torn books she borrowed from neighbors. She believed knowledge could open doors that poverty had locked. One evening, Lena asked softly, "Didi, do you think poor people can ever change their fate?" Era paused, then answered with quiet strength, "Only if they refuse to accept the fate others give them." But life tested that belief soon. One day, the shop owner accused Era of stealing money, something she never did. Without listening, he threw her out in front of everyone. Humiliated and broken, Era walked home with tears she refused to show. That night, she couldn't sleep. For the first time, doubt entered her heart. "How long can we survive like this?" she whispered. Lena held her hand and said something unexpected. "Maybe this pain is teaching us something. Maybe we are meant to build our own way." Those words became a turning point. The next day, Era decided not to beg for work again. Using her small savings, she bought leftover cloth pieces from the market. At night, under a dim lamp, she started stitching simple scarves and handkerchiefs. Lena helped by designing small patterns and writing little hopeful messages on paper tags. They tried to sell them in the market, but people laughed. "Who will buy from two poor girls? Go home," they said. Rejection came again and again. But something inside the sisters had changed. They were no longer waiting for mercy. They were building courage. One evening, a traveler from the city noticed their handmade items. He admired the honesty in their work and bought a few pieces. Before leaving, he said, "Never stop. Talent grows when mixed with patience." That moment lit a fire inside them. For the first time, their effort turned into belief, and slowly, very slowly, the world began to notice. Days turned into months. The sisters' small work began gaining attention. A few regular customers started returning. Their earnings were still small, but enough to bring food without fear. Lena also began telling stories of struggle, hope, and courage, to children nearby. People gathered just to listen. Her words carried warmth. Her voice healed tired hearts. But just when life seemed to improve, fate struck again. One night, a fire broke out in the nearby market. Their little storage corner, filled with cloth, savings, and dreams, was burned to ashes. Everything was gone. Era fell to her knees, staring at the black remains. This time, she couldn't hold back her tears. "All our effort gone," she whispered. For days, they barely spoke. Hunger returned. Fear returned. Darkness returned. The world seemed cruel again. But Lena, though broken, still believed. She said softly, "Didi, we survived worse. Fire can burn things, not who we are." Those words awakened something deep inside Era. Instead of giving up, they chose to rebuild, not with money, but with trust. They started helping others for free, teaching children, stitching clothes for widows, helping elders. Slowly, people noticed their honesty. A local teacher offered Lena access to books. A woman offered Era sewing tools. Someone gave them a small space to work. Kindness returned, multiplied. Their story spread from street to street. People began to support them not out of pity, but respect. Soon, they formed a small group teaching skills to poor girls. What began as survival turned into a mission. They were no longer just struggling sisters. They were becoming symbols of strength, and destiny was preparing its final chapter, one that would change their lives forever. Years passed. The same village that once ignored two poor sisters now gathered around a beautiful center called the Hope House. It stood where their broken shelter once was. Inside, girls learned reading, sewing, art, and self-belief. Laughter replaced silence. Confidence replaced fear. Era had become a leader, calm, respected, strong. Lena had become a storyteller and teacher whose words inspired hearts far beyond the village. They were invited to speak at events. Their story traveled through towns and cities. People wanted to know how two poor sisters survived everything and still chose kindness. One evening, during a community gathering, Lena stood on stage and looked at the crowd. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but emotion. "We were once called poor," she said, "but poverty was never our identity. It was our classroom." The crowd fell silent. She continued, "We learned patience when we had nothing. We learned unity when the world turned away. We learned strength when we were broken." Era stepped forward and added softly, "We didn't become successful because we were lucky. We became successful because we refused to stop believing." Tears filled many eyes. Among the crowd were people who once mocked them, now standing with respect. That night, under the same sky that once watched their suffering, the sisters stood side by side. They remembered the hunger, the insults, the cold nights, the fear, and they smiled, not because life was perfect, but because they had conquered themselves. Before leaving the stage, Lena spoke the final words. "If you are poor today, don't think your story is over. Sometimes, the hardest beginning creates the most powerful ending." The sisters held hands as the lights dimmed. Their journey, from broken beginnings to meaningful success, became a story told for generations. A story of hope, a story of courage, a story of two poor sisters who turned pain into purpose.